So I started off that job, and as I was driving, I was thinking to myself, what can I do with my life? And what do I want to do?
So it was like the huge jump from dispatcher to the manager.
Nachman, when you're going to be 30 years old, what do you want to be?
So how was it in your case? Like you decided to create a business, and where did you start?
Because I had set up my office already. Monday morning, I walked in, okay, now I need work.
So how long time took you to build the software, and how hard was the onboarding of the clients?
Is people want to compare this year's sales versus last year. They want to see like where they're declining, where they're losing. And we actually built out a beautiful comparison report. If you have, let's say, 3 products on Amazon and the cost is the same and it hasn't changed over a year. So the way I usually do it is when a customer calls me with this question, I tell them, let's have a phone call with your accountant.
Izabella Ritz and Amazon Made Simple podcast. And today we're going to talk about something technical about numbers. And as you know, when you're launching your business on Amazon or e-commerce, or you're doing great and you want to improve your sales, you have to do your numbers. You have to understand your cost of goods. You have to understand the cost of PPC. You have to understand what actually, how your numbers look like, because sometimes we see the big revenue, but we don't understand what it is about. The revenue is one thing, your cost of goods is another one. So how much money you actually keeping in a pocket. But to understand this stuff, it's very hard to learn. So we're trying to tell you stories that will keep you interested, and you'll be able to be engaged while you're here with us today. And I'm welcoming my new guest is Nachman Leiser with Connectbooks. Nachman, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, good morning. Welcome. Thank you so much for having me on the podcast. I'm excited to be here.
Well, I'm excited to interview you today. So I believe nothing was happening, like you've been born and then you grew up and said, okay, since today I'm going to do bookkeeping, and now I decided to be an accountant, right? And more than you decided to create the software that will keep things together and will be helping people. So how did it happen, and where the story actually started?
Yeah, I have quite an interesting story and quite a background. So when I started to look out for work, I had a very hard time finding a job. It was in 2011. There weren't, at that point, it was nothing close to what it was today. I actually read an interesting article. They're saying that, you have the millennials. Those are the people who entered the workforce after 2008. Then you have, they call now the new generation, the Gen Z. And they're saying the new generation is very different, because the millennials, people like me who entered the workforce around that time, we were right after the 2008 recession, where the economy was down and we were expected to work hard, and the wages weren't as high as that point. Versus these days, anybody who enters the workforce, they expect everything from you. And, the wages are competitive. I mean, stuff have maybe changed a little bit in the last half a year since the economy moved. But in general, it's a very different somebody entering the workforce in the last year than somebody who entered the workforce 10 years ago. So they're kind of sending the people who are employers, like the millennials that have businesses, have to kind of adapt to today's generation, which is a little bit different. So back in the days when I entered the workforce in 2011, there weren't any jobs. And I also I lived more in a suburb. I still live in the same area, more like a suburb style, not in a city. So it was hard to find a job. And I, sent out my resume probably to over 50 or 60 places, got 0 responses, maybe a few interviews, and, nothing that made sense or whatever. And I was literally ready to do anything. So the only other option which I had at that point, because I needed money, was to start driving taxi services. Now, I had a friend who owned this taxi company in the local area. It pretty much was more like it was more like a car service, where people pre-ordered and stuff like that. And he kept on telling me, like, why don't you come work for me? And I was like, I'm looking for a normal job. But after like 5 weeks of, feeling totally exhausted and I couldn't sit home anymore, I told him I'm going to do it. So I started off that job. And as I was driving, I was thinking to myself, what can I do with my life? And what do I want to do? And I also was looking to, I was I tried so many different positions and I wasn't the ability at the moment. I like to just jump into anything. So I came up with the idea to become an accountant. And part of the reasons were that I found a master's degree program that was not during business hours. It was on Sunday and afternoons, which that helped me, keep the job because I didn't have the ability to just jump to college for 2 years. And that's why I was able to like work, during the day and at the same time, go to school. So I started first off, finishing my bachelor's, and I finished that. At the same time, what ended up happening was I was finding a little difficult to studying because I needed more time. I couldn't just work 10 hours a day and then expect to have a clear mind to study and take all the tests. So I was thinking of doing, doing maybe more like bus driving. So buses, like school buses, other stuff, the local schools, they pay pretty well, meaning compared to a car service driver, not compared to whatever, but they had an option where you can work like 4 or 5 hours a day and you can make something. And then at the other time I figured I can study. So that was kind of what I was thinking to do. So I actually
But you have a place where to live, right? So you didn't have to pay the bills.
No, I did. No, I was on my own. Yeah, I had to pay the bills at that point. Otherwise, I would have just gone to school. So I had to pay my bills and I had to take care of it. So I did actually the CDL license. I actually got CDL, I got bus license. And when it's a little bit of a process to get CDL. Now, the day I actually passed my road test, my manager from the car service called me up and he said that we're looking for a dispatcher in the office. Do you want the office position? So at the same time, so what ended up happening was that I told him I was like so fed up from driving car service and so fed up from just being on the road. And I said, you know what, I will just accept an office position. So I started to work in the office, which is way easier. It was like, 9 to 5, just, dispatching. I mean, dispatching at this point, it's, with Uber around these days, it's basically pretty much useless a dispatcher because, today you do it on your phone and Uber decides all the calls. But back in the days, this was in 2011, before Uber even existed. And what I needed to do is, manually answer phone calls. And we had to answer like anywhere between 6 to 10 calls under a minute and let the customer know if we do have a car for them and if we do, what the ETA is. So we had like a list, like it was like something like an Excel sheet program. I mean, it was built on Access, but like I had to keep track and tell them, okay, like I think I can have a car in like 10 minutes, so in like 2 minutes. And my goal was like when somebody would drop off, they should get a pickup in the same area. So if somebody's not dropping off in that area, I tell them, look, I can send somebody, but it's going to take a lot of time. So that was like, it would get very hectic at some point. So I did that job for like another half a year. And then at the same time, the manager who managed the taxi company left the business. So I actually got promoted to become the manager. So I actually got at that point promoted to be this manager of this taxi company. And it was a very challenging position, especially at a very young age. They just like were looking around for somebody. They had a long time finding someone and they're like, you're a qualified candidate. So they just kind of gave it to me. And I started to work on that. And that was a whole different,
So it was like the huge jump from dispatcher to the manager where like, it's such a big gap with the skills as well. So how you've been able to figure it out to do something that you never did?
It was probably the first time that I started keeping Tylenol on my desk and started popping Tylenol throughout the day. That's how it was in the beginning. It could still happen today. It's not like I never have to pop Tylenol these days, but it's not on a day-to-day basis. At that point, I'd probably take every day. I would get, from the amount of stress I would have, it just all of a sudden dumped on me. Now, the old manager was still there to train me and is there to help me. Now, it was very difficult, and I was on the job for a year. I grew the business tremendously, and I, grew the profit margins of the business tremendously. And then, but what happened was I really had started my whole idea of going for an accounting degree. and I still wanted to pursue it. So I finished up my bachelor's, and then I started the master's. The master's was very difficult. And it came to a point where being a manager of a car service company, I was literally working like 24 hours, because the company opens up 8 o'clock in the morning. The company didn't close till 10 o'clock at night. And then like sometimes the company also owned their cars. So like if a driver gets stuck 12 o'clock at night, like a driver would call me up like 11 o'clock at night, even the company closed at 10. A lot of times, the dispatcher would give them like another few calls. And he's like, oh, I just finished, my day, and I pulled into somebody's driveway to drop them off. My car broke down. So I'm like, can you ask them if you could leave it there overnight? They're like, no, because I'm blocking four other parking spots, and these people have nowhere to park because they can't park on the street because they're living in a main road. And they're like, I need to get my car out of here. So I had to get dressed, get a tow truck, and 11:30 at night, who's coming to tow? So I waited like 2 hours. And it was kind of like around the, always have to be around the clock. The company also is open on Sundays, because Sundays people need taxis. So I never really had like personal time where I can say, okay, now I'm focusing, to study throughout the week. So it came to a point where when I had to kind of make a decision what I want to do. Either I continue my accounting degree, or I, stick with this car service position. So I called my uncle and I asked him what he thinks I should do. So he told me, Nachman, when you're going to be 30 years old, what do you want to be? Do you want to be the car service manager? Or do you want to be the accountant? I said, I'd rather be the accountant. He's like, can you afford the education? And, while you finish it, I said, yeah, because the plan was that I still have my bus license. So I figured I can always swap back to the bus position. And in the same time, I can just, finish my accounting degree, and then I'll do it for a year or two till I finish. And then I'll go find something. So that was my idea I was going to do then. So I called up my boss the next day, and I told him I want to quit. So he was like all upset. He's like, why, what? So I explained to him, look, I'm looking in accounting and it's not really what I want to do. So he's like, okay, give me some time. And we worked at a time, till he'll find somebody else and I'll move over. In the meantime, my boss also owned a different business, which was a wholesale kitchen company. And he calls me up 2 days later. He's like, look, you already gave me notice in that company. You're leaving. I'm actually looking for a qualified bookkeeper in this business, and you did such a good job there. How about you become the bookkeeper here? So I thought to myself, wow, it's an amazing opportunity here. And also it was like what I was looking to do. So I ended up joining his other business. And at the same time, I ended up going to school. And it took like another 3 years till I finished my master's degree and I actually graduated. And at the time when I was working as a bookkeeper, I actually worked my way up and became the CFO of the company. So by the time I left that other company, I had already I would say 4 other people in accounting department under me, taking care of the day-to-day task. And my job at that point was just to oversee and also do the financial reporting and, manage the cash flow and stuff like that. So I worked there for 3.5, 4 years, and I gained a ton of experience. Part of my biggest experience, which I actually applied till today, is understanding cost of goods sold. So they had a warehouse of 200,000 square feet, and there are 25,000 different SKUs. So in the kitchen business, every single cabinet is a different SKU. And also cabinets are probably the most complex inventory you can have, because you can have a base cabinet. Yeah, base is a regular cabinet that can be a 24-inch, which means it takes 2 12-inch doors. And then you can have a base cabinet that's a 12-inch, which takes 1 12-inch door. So if you want to know about all these complicated assemblies that Amazon sellers do, that's where I kind of picked up my knowledge. And part of my deal was, when I made the P&L for the company, I had to understand what the accurate cost of goods sold is. And it was very complicated. We use very complicated ERP systems to bring all that. Plus, we also use QuickBooks. But, in order calculating cost of goods sold and understanding how assemblies works and group items and figuring all this out was a challenge and a nightmare in its own. But, that's where I gained a ton of experience in this particular field. And
so you've been able to learn not just cost of goods, but how the kitchen business works, and how the huge business works. And it was the experience, not just based on the bookkeeping, you just been consuming entrepreneurship as well.
Right. I mean, I don't really do anything I actually even at one point might have done a few side projects, kitchens, but I didn't want to go into the kitchen industry. But but it was just like understanding from dealing with a big business and understanding in depth, like these numbers is complicated. And I mean, I see businesses struggling with this all day, and every other Amazon seller I talk to struggles with this point. It's not like, and then also another thing was also tracking inventory. So like, for example, if we sold from a certain style X amount of units, make sure that the guy who purchases understands how much he sold, and he doesn't just purchase, whatever he likes or whatever he thinks is good. So it wasn't so easy. Most software is like in the Amazon industry, the beautiful part of the Amazon industry is that there's so many Amazon sellers. And if you find out a unique solution, you can sell it to so many people. So like, let's say, for example, somebody wants to have a good forecasting tool, they can use like Restock Pro, right? But in the kitchen industry, you don't have that. And there's not that many kitchen companies. I even tried at one point to make something, but in the beginning, I came up with some idea because so what happened was when I left after I finished school, I decided I'm going to try to work for a CPA. So again, I was out of luck. I went for a couple of interviews. This was back in 2017, and where accountants were not looking to hire. Today, every single accountant is desperate to hire, but they're not. And I even got a job and got fired a minute later. The guy called me up 2 hours later. No, he doesn't want me. The main reason why people didn't want to hire me, so I didn't want to go to corporate America. Wasn't interested in going that type. I wanted something more local, easy, and eventually just go on my own a few years later. So most people saw me as a threat because I came with so much CFO experience. They're like, okay, you're going to be here for 2 years and just go on your own. So they didn't want to hire me. So that's the main reason why I didn't get any positions. And I decided I got to do something. So that's when I came up with the idea, I'm going to open up a bookkeeping company. So when I opened up a bookkeeping company, I focused on small to medium-sized businesses. And the idea of a bookkeeping wasn't that we just do data entry, was because what happens is if you do your books the right way.
Let's stop here for a second. So you decided to open the company. To open the company, generally speaking, you have to have or networking, or you have to have the investments, or both, and experience on top. Sometimes experience comes later. So how was it in your case? Like, you decided to create a business, and where did you start?
So I mean, my goal originally from going to school and all that was to be a CPA and like have my own CPA from one day. So that's what I was always working towards. Now, I put away money throughout the time working as a CFO to have, enough money to go on my own. And then at the same time, the problem was that the position as CFO was pretty a difficult position, meaning it's not, I wasn't able to do two things at once. And I felt like as long as I'm in that company, I'm not going to be able to as long as I'm in that company, I'm not going to be able to run my own business. I was like it was just too overwhelming. I was very committed to my job, and I'm always the type that likes to go the extra mile. So I didn't find myself being able to just leave the job, meaning to do a hybrid situation. So I told my boss I'm quitting, and I told him I'm giving him 3 months notice. And I said in 3 months I plan to go on my own. And I said, you have enough time to find anybody and I'll train them. And I actually ended up finding the guy for him, and I actually trained in the guy. And then the problem was I didn't want to accept any customers or take on customers because it was just too much for me while I had my job. And then once I started, I say probably one of the best days of my life. So what happened was when I finished, when my last day in my job was on a Thursday, and then I officially planned to start my business the following Monday. So I had one Friday that was officially my day off. That day, every time before somebody opens a business, you have to first thing you got to do is dream, because you have no dreams and there's no business. So you have to be a dreamer. So I was dreaming, you can't even imagine of what I was dreaming, how my business was going to disrupt in 6 months, and how everything I was going to be like a millionaire in 1 year, and about everything. So that Friday, I had no more pressure from my old job because I've already gone. So the new guy took it over. Thursday was my last day. So Friday, I had no more pressure from my old job. I remember walking into Costco, no pressure. And then just so happy because I had these huge dreams. And then Monday morning, everything just fell apart. Because I walked into I had set up my office already. Monday morning, I walked in, okay, now I need work. Am I finding customers? What am I doing next? So I had that one day. It was like, I always think back to it, how I look at how funny it was. But I don't know if I'll ever get back such a day ever in my life. But
so what did you do at this moment? Because here we are, you're
yeah,
free. You're free
meaning,
now. You have business that you can do, but you don't have clients.
as big as you are, you're always gonna have stress. As big as as many workers as you have, there's no such thing. And I actually saw other entrepreneurs talking about there's no such thing as running a business stress-free. A business comes with stress, and these pros and cons. These pros of being a business owner, these cons about it, but this is part of the deal that you got to do. So I don't foresee myself in the future ever being like saying I'll be stress-free, meaning I work on myself to keep calm, and I handle stress pretty well. It's not like in the beginning I had a very hard time dealing with it, and you have to kind of relax a little bit. And if a customer once decides to leave, it's not the end of the world. There's other customers out there as well who you can get. You're not shutting down tomorrow. All these phobias, it takes a little time to settle with it. And also once your business is established, you're more confident, and it takes a little time. I'm ready on my own for 6 years, so it's very different.
So where did you get your first client?
So I took out my cell phone, went through my contact list, and I called everybody who I knew and every person I spoke to. And I would say within 6 months, within 3 months, I managed to hire my first employee. And within 6 months, we were already profitable.
Amazing.
Yeah. So, but that was just hustling and bustling through my contacts. And, that's where, so I was telling you before that I tried to make, when I started this bookkeeping company, so the idea of the bookkeeping was that we do bookkeeping, but plus more like CFO services. So these other companies that they'll do your books, and then at the end of the month, if you have questions, they're not there to answer. They don't want to say anything. Like they don't know. So my thing was, since I was coming from the CFO background and I was focused so much on the books, understanding proper cost of goods sold, understanding inventory, understanding cash flow, and I was busy with all this stuff, I kind of had all these tools. And my pitch was that, look, I'll do your bookkeeping, and then at the end of the month, we'll have a call to go it over, but I will clearly explain to you everything what's going on in the business. And also the books will be very simple and clear for you to understand. So that was.
And how did you decide that it will be bookkeeping for Amazon sellers or for e-commerce?
So I didn't decide that originally.
Started?
Yeah. So originally I did not decide it. I actually was coming from the kitchen industry, and one of my first 2 clients were actually kitchen businesses. Because I just approached a lot of kitchen companies in my area, and I said, I used to be the CFO in this wholesale company. Do you want me to do your bookkeeping? So they right away jumped in it. And also I showed them how the books were so messed up, because it was a complicated way to track inventory and not to track inventory. So I started off at that point, and I actually did try to create some sort of program for kitchen companies within QuickBooks, but there wasn't really much of a market. There's maybe, let's say, 10 stores in my area. So maybe one or two of them said they may be interested, and the other 5 weren't. Versus where Amazon, the system is so much bigger, and also Amazon, everybody, like in Amazon, it was always the norm to do Zoom calls and softwares, and today Zoom is normal, but like 6 years ago it wasn't. People still wanted the in-person meeting, but in the Amazon ecosystem, everything was online, so it was a normal thing, a normal way to operate. So I started this bookkeeping company, and I, was looking for business. And one of the ways which actually helped my business a lot was I ran a few ads that didn't yield any results. I did a write-up. So I had a write-up article where I explained how I can help wholesale companies and manufacturing businesses understanding proper cost of goods sold and all that. So a guy called me up, and he said that one Amazon business, and I need proper books. What turned out to be is there were 2 partners, and they wanted to split up. So partner A wanted to buy out partner B. Now the problem was that partner B was not a 50% partner. Partner B, they were a private label company with like 10 products, but partner B was only a partner in 3 out of the 10 products. So we need to understand how much money each product made, and then kind of tell them, okay, these 3 products made this amount of money the last 2 years, and then they made a deal between themselves. So that was my actually first challenge to Amazon. I spent when they came to me, they literally had nothing, no books, nothing. I just literally got a set of bank statements, and I was supposed to go through every transaction. Anything I didn't have, I need to ask them and get back and forth. So I started to work in it. It took me, I would say, like 5 months to put the whole picture together. And I had to charge them a lot of money. And then I kind of came into my, and they also kept on telling me, there's no good ideas of bookkeeping out there, and if you could do something. So that's when the idea popped into me, let me build a software. Now, next door to my office was a software developer, a guy who did custom software. So I told him, no, I have this idea. Would you want to build it for me? And he was like, yeah, I can do this. So that's kind of where I got in. Originally, when I built Connectbooks, I didn't build it to sell. I built it for my bookkeeping company so I can acquire more Amazon businesses for bookkeeping. In the back end, I would streamline my process, and I would, with the software, we cut down like 70% of the work that I had to do at that point. Today, when we need to do, let's say, 2 years of books, we spin it around in no time, like 6 to 8 weeks, we have it done, and the price is a quarter of what we used to charge. So we can probably do it faster. Today we buffer. I can probably do it in 2 to 3 weeks, but we buffer 6 weeks. So I'm saying is like we could spin stuff around much faster, way cheaper, and more clarity, more accurate, beautiful reports, just because we have the software.
So how long time took you to build the software, and how hard was the onboarding of the clients?
So what happened was with the software, I originally built it for myself. And then I was talking to Amazon sellers. They're like, look, we have bookkeepers, or we're using a bookkeeping company, or we have like a CFO. And, we would like to use the software for ourselves. So what ended up happening was we made like a little U-turn, and we kind of split the company in two. So we still do the bookkeeping, and then we had the software. Now, software, I would probably say, is one of the hardest businesses out there. It's in a certain sense somewhat an Amazon business. You got to constantly keep on investing. You got to constantly keep on building on new features. You got to maintain the customers, keep them happy. It sounds way easier than it is. I would say probably the biggest challenge that lies a lot in software is a lot of people have no clue what they're doing, and so was I when I started. If I build now another software, I would have a head start from anybody with 4 years, because all the stuff that we did originally, stuff that customers don't even know. It's even like certain way how we built stuff, which made problems later on, which in the beginning we were like very short-sighted, because I just didn't know. It wasn't like, it's not that I didn't have a vision of having a few thousand customers with the software. It just didn't know that if we do this in 3 years, and then we'll pay a price. And that kind of works almost with a lot of software. I know a handful of softwares will have the issue, and it happens to a lot of people. Usually, when you see companies that move very fast, usually the founder has already done like 3 or 4 softwares. So he knows already right away from the get-go, how to start it up, how to pull it through, and how to do it the right way. So we kind of jumped into the software. And then what ended up happening was, with our bookkeeping company, we started getting a lot of customers like called us in, and either they tried to do it themselves and they saw they can't, so they asked us if we can help them. We said, look, we can also do the bookkeeping as well. So what happened was we started getting a lot of bookkeeping business through the software as well. So at that point, it became to me like a no-brainer to kind of just take the whole bookkeeping company, and we pivoted just for e-commerce. So the benefit is that when I explained to somebody, I said, if you want to take bookkeeping from us or bookkeeping from somebody else, let's say we both charge the same price. In our company, you're going to get somebody who is completely focused just on e-commerce, and they are a pro and an expert when it comes to e-commerce bookkeeping. Whereas if you go to somebody else, and they hire a bookkeeper, if that bookkeeper is working on 4 to 5 different type of businesses, they're not going to be as experienced and as an expert in e-commerce, and most likely, you're not going to get what we're giving. It's just not the same. Somebody's working on a kitchen business, and somebody's also working on a wholesale company, and they're working on an urgent care, and then you're working on a distributor, and plus a plumber, and then you're also trying to do an Amazon business. You can't put the proper attention to it. Versus we just do one thing. Now we work with a lot of companies, but we do the same thing for everybody. So if we learn something new, we learn it for everybody. Also, we have the software, which streamlines the process. It dumbs down. It takes away all the hard work from the bookkeeping. And also, if like we see we need a feature, we actually build it. So the benefit of us doing the bookkeeping, we're also hands-on. Like I'm rolling out a new feature now. We're changing out certain stuff, and I'm actually testing it myself with customers and working with it hands-on. So I get to feel how the customer feels. The worst thing for companies to do is when the founders or the managers like disconnect from the customers and they just don't feel the pain. And that can happen very easily when the company grows and there's a lot of business and there's a lot of stuff going on. Sometimes the top of, the C-levels just forget about it. And like, well, what's the big deal to do this? Or what's the big deal to kind of go this route? And I was like, well, if you would actually do the bookkeeping and you would see that pain takes the bookkeeper an extra hour, you would understand the pain they're going through and you wouldn't do it that way. So, that's I like the balance between the two. So it kind of keeps us in the loop.
So, and what we're talking, it's amazing story and it's amazing approach you've been using. However, here's the question. So I am not a bookkeeper, of course, and I'm super far away from all these taxes. I don't like to put the things together with like CPA and like every single time we're filing taxes or we're doing any bookkeepings. For me, it's a stress because like I hate it. So when I see people who loves it, I adore these people. But again, everyone loves something that they're passionate about.
But I hate marketing.
See? Yeah, that's why some people do.
I'm working out with a consultant. She wants to know my buyer personas and all the other, and make me this. I like, don't talk to me. Find someone else in the company who to make crazy. Just not me. I was like, you want me to do some bookkeeping, Excel sheet work? I'll do it till 4:00 in the morning, but just not marketing.
Yeah, when you show me Excel sheet, I am like, I'm going to the stress mode. So, and here's the question. I remember when I launched my Amazon 2015, in 2016, I think I started using TaxJar. Then I realized that we have to use the QuickBooks, and we started using TaxJar and QuickBooks, and right now we just use accountants, we use CPA. So when people like me want to like do bookkeeping without like any type of the headaches, and they're using all the different softwares that they don't really understand why they need them, because like for TaxJar, I knew I don't have to file any reports because I have Nexus there, Nexus here. So I connected all this and I'm like, okay, I'm not doing all this stuff. Then I realized that I still have to do something. Like that was such a big painful experience. However, so when we're talking about Connectbooks, based on the name Connect, I assume it's not just like you're connecting all your bookkeepings. You also don't need to use any other type of the software where you have to split in between QuickBooks and TaxJar and maybe something else. Am I correct or incorrect?
So I'll explain it. First of all, what we do is we integrate to QuickBooks. So you still need to have QuickBooks. But one thing which I like to differentiate a lot myself from tax preparers, in accounting, there's, you have, like even when you take the CPA exam, there's 4 different, parts. There's, you have the accounting part, you have the taxes, you have the compliance, you have the audit. So accounting and taxes are 2 different things, meaning obviously that one, in order to pay your taxes, you have to have the accounting, but meaning when we do bookkeeping, the idea is not just, we don't do bookkeeping usually to prepare for taxes. If your goal is that I just need to file my taxes, usually your CPA can do it for you and they'll do it much cheaper than we charge. Our goal is to give you clarity in the business. Now, what I'm seeing these days with the economy going downhill, we're actually getting a lot more customers because people really need our books. People who I've been talking to for the last 4 years didn't want to look at me are actually begging us now for our product. And the big sellers, they want certain features. Like, for example, our most requested feature that's coming in now is people want to compare this year's sales versus last year. They want to see like where they're declining, where they're losing. And we actually built out a beautiful comparison report, which we will show you the sales and all the fees this year versus last year. We'll also show you the ad spend. The ad spend, meaning the ad spend we can only do for existing customers because Amazon locks the API after 60 days.
How it's different from the dashboards that already exist? Like, for example, you're going to like Helium 10 or any other software, and you can see on a dashboard how much money you make, and you can also compare chart to chart.
So it's very different. So in terms of in terms of example, I had a customer, for example, I did actually a case study with her. She was using, I don't want to name the platform, but she was using a very reputable platform. And all of a sudden, she used to always have like $500,000 in the bank, and all of a sudden the money started dwindling, and she didn't know what to do. And she had spoken to me 2 times. She's a bit hesitant to set up Connectbooks and QuickBooks. And I explained to her, if you want to have proper bookkeeping and you want to make sure everything is accurate, you got to do it this way. So it took her like 2 months to set up, QuickBooks the right way and get everything done. And then what ended up happening is that a lot of softwares don't calculate all the other fees. They don't calculate everything properly. And turned out that, on an order level, she was profitable. But if you started accounting for all her returns, all the unsellable returns, and all the other fees that Amazon puts in, she was not profitable at all. I had a story 2 weeks ago with a guy. He was not making money on Amazon, and the big seller. And I told him, look, you're not making money. I said, he called me up and he was like trying to see where he can cut costs. I said, look, your overhead is $100,000. Your main overhead comes from your employees and rent. I said, can you fire any employees? He's like, no, I need them all. So I said, okay, so let's put that aside. I said, look, if you want to maybe call a few service providers and try to squeeze out $1,000 of them, how much do you think you're going to end off? You'll shave $5,000 from your overhead. That's not helping you. I said, your problem is in Amazon. I said, you're not profitable on Amazon. And he couldn't believe it. So he tells me, I show him a product he lost money on. So, and the problem is the guy also had a lot of SKUs. So it wasn't so easy to just it wasn't like private label, it's 10 SKUs. So he takes this one product and he goes to the FBA calculator and he puts in, you see, I'm supposed to make $7 after Amazon fees. I said, yeah, the FBA calculator is very nice, but you didn't account for PPC, you didn't account for storage fees, you didn't account for returns, you didn't account for unsellable returns that go in the garbage, you didn't account for inbound shipments. I said, there's so many stuff you didn't account for. Like, how do you just rely on it? And then he was using like a PPC software that does his PPC, they do the ads, which I think is very not right from them. But I can understand what they're trying to do, but it's really not right what they're doing. Basically, what these PPC softwares do is they want you to, run a lot of campaigns. And obviously, they have a way how they charge. And it was not a cheap software. And they have also a profitability report that they show you. And based on that, they adjust campaigns. But those profitability reports only include orders. Now, if you're, let's say, for example, in the electronic industry and other industry, you can have a very high return rate, especially through the season where people can return up to January 31st. People can do a lot of returns. So when you're looking at a dashboard, first thing is it orders only or is it everything else? Our dashboard can be filtered down to orders, but it's with everything else. Another strong part of our software is that we're a bookkeeping software. So when we send data to QuickBooks, one of the things we need to do is match the bank. So if you get a deposit from Amazon, let's say for $50,000, right? That doesn't mean that was $50,000 your sales. The sales, let's say, were $100,000. There was fees.
Yeah, it's 50,000 out of revenue minus PPC, and so you have money to operate.
Right. So when we pull data from Amazon, we pull 2 APIs. One API is how much money came into the bank. The next API is going to be all the details of what came in. And we reconcile every single Amazon fee up to the bank deposit. So every single Amazon fee that is out there will be included in our report because we always have it. And our numbers are always accurate because we constantly reconcile down to the fees. Now, another strong point where we differ from Helium 10's dashboard, in Helium 10, you can only put in one cost. We have the ability to put in a lot of different types of costs. When the cost goes up, the cost goes down, and then the other thing is we also have landed cost. So what if you want to calculate how much inbound shipment needs to be, right? In Helium 10, you can't do that. It's a very static report. Like, tell me what your cost is, and you do all the calculations your end. And then when you want to run a report for last year, it shows you lost money. You run a report for this year, it shows you make money. Like, all these informations in our end, that's what we deal with. And also we have our integration to QuickBooks is if you use our inventory tracking platform, means to say that you track your inventory in QuickBooks. And the reason why I like to track inventory in QuickBooks is if your cost changes and fluctuates a lot, all you got basically when you do your bookkeeping, you enter bills in QuickBooks, right? So you get a bill from your vendor, you enter in QuickBooks. Now, if you itemize a QuickBooks, and you put in every bill into QuickBooks, the only thing you have to do is just enter the bill, the quantity, and the amount you bought. Now, let's say you buy in January 100 units at $1 and you sell 80 units. Now in February, you buy another 100 units and you're paying out $2. But now you still have 20 units of the previous stock. So what is your cost? So your cost isn't $1.50, meaning I can say, look, I bought 200 units and I paid $300 in total, maybe $3.50. No. In January, your cost is $1 because we know that that from the 100 units you bought, those 80 units that sold in January costed $1. So meaning to say, we know that was the cost in January. So in February, the question is what's going to be the cost. So these two methods you can use. You can either use first in, first out, which would, the first 20 units would account for $1 and then it would move to $2. Or you can you can say your average cost is $1.83. Which $1.83 would be an average from 100 units that's bought in February with the 20 units remaining in January and combine that. So all these kind of calculations, and then this is just a simple calculation. Imagine adding a landed cost on top of that. Imagine that the shipping was one amount in January and February, a different amount. And let's make it a little more complicated. Let's say you have an assembly item or a group item. So you have 3 different products that you're combining into one listing. All 3 have different averages, costs, and all 3 have all that. So if you're kind of dealing with a lot of complexity and, or just want to have like a good grip on the accounting and that part, we differ a lot, from the standard dashboards and the standard reporting. If you have, let's say, 3 products on Amazon and the cost is the same and it hasn't changed over a year, then you're right. Maybe just use that.
And I believe when you brought up a very fair point, when you have cost of goods in October and in February and in January, and all of them are different. At the same time, especially when sellers are struggling with the Q4, they are shipping inventory with the different ways. Like some of them are coming express, some of them are coming via sea, some of them are coming via air and express air. And then you have the same unit delivered on Amazon or to any other platform, but the different ways. And then the cost of goods is already different. And here's the question. So if I am if I have multi-channels, so I am selling on a different platforms, is it do you do bookkeeping based on the platform, or we can integrate all the platforms together and the bookkeeping will be in one place?
So we now currently integrate with meaning I'd say the 4 biggest platforms are out there. On Amazon, we work with all Amazon marketplaces, all countries. We do eBay, we do Walmart, and we also do Shopify. We are also working on, having a feature where people can import orders from other marketplaces, because we're rolling out more marketplaces, but then it might be somebody has a marketplace that let's say only one person sells on, but they want to import. So we have solutions that we're working on that should work for all other platforms. But I say, overall, these are the 4 main platforms that most people sell on today. And, this is where we connect.
So another question here. So for example, if it's probably will be a super simple question for you, maybe it will be actually complicated. So let's say I own 4 different brands on Amazon. Every single brand will be under different LLC. In this case, but all of them I am selling under the same account. At this point, should I connect one at the time, or should I connect all of them at the same time to your platform? And how at this point the bookkeeping works? Is it based on one LLC, or is it based on one account / one person, and you can add there as many brands, LLCs as you want?
So the answer for this is a very good answer, and that comes based off my experience. So I can do it either way, meaning we can set up one set of QuickBooks, which can have 4 LLCs in it, or we can set up 4 different sets of QuickBooks, which is for all different LLCs. So the way I usually do it is when a customer calls me with this question, I tell them, let's have a phone call with your accountant. And I want to go back a second to the other question, which I didn't answer properly, was what is the difference between an accountant and a bookkeeper? So what we're saying is, if the whole idea you're doing bookkeeping is just to file your taxes, you can probably take a bank statement and go to the accountant at the end of the year, and he can just figure something out in Excel, and maybe, or he'll do a QuickBooks file, but something pretty fast, and then file. In terms of the what's called again, in terms of bookkeeping, what we do is we actually do month to month, meaning we're not just at the end of the year. We do month to month bookkeeping, and the idea is that people want to know what they're making on a monthly basis, like how well is their business doing? How has the business changed this month versus the last month? Meaning, if you're looking to get clarity in your business and you're looking to understand the ups and downs and looking to gain like very deep understanding, that's kind of where we shine. And that's really the difference. Now, if we do the bookkeeping throughout the year, at the end of the year, we'll give the set of books to the accountant and they can file it, no problem. It's not like that can't be used. It's just that it's very different. And it's different type of bookkeeping. You have accrual-based accounting, which we do. And then you have cash basis. Cash basis means we just look what comes into the bank and what goes out of the bank, which the best way to describe it is in cash basis, let's say November. So it's before the season. So you spend $500,000 to buy merchandise. If you're doing cash basis, you'll record that $500,000 as an expense because you wrote a check for $500,000. And if you're doing accrual basis, we wouldn't put that 500 as an expense. We would put it into inventory and we only expense what it was sold. So in accrual-based accounting, you'll be able to see, what your business is actually making, because you're not, cost of goods sold is not based on what you buy, it's based on what you actually sold. So the cost of the products that you sold this month was only $200,000. We will show you an expense of $200,000 versus cash basis will show you $500. Now, cash basis accounting is very easy to do, and it's way less, it's not complicated at all. But, for tax purposes, you can probably work something out with your CPA, just to file at the end of the year. And in terms of, going back to the other question, in terms of having, how to do the LLC structure, it varies case by case, and we work with the accountants at the end of the year. So usually what I do is I say, let me have a call with your accountant. Let me discuss it with them to see how they file the taxes. Because sometimes I have accountants that want it separate. And sometimes I have accountants that have the LLC structure that one LLC owns all other LLCs, and they can make one big return for all. So it really depends on the accountant. And my advice is that I have already done bookkeeping where we did it in one QuickBooks file and the accountant wanted it at the end of the year in two. And there was quite of a pain splitting it up. We had to redo a lot of work. So that's why usually I tell you, speak right with your accountant how to set it up. Now, even if he doesn't do the bookkeeping, even if you have the best bookkeeper, just make sure that you're on the same page with the accountant and that part, gets done.
So generally speaking, you have to work as a partner in between accountant of the company and bookkeeping that you guys are doing. So it's supposed to be hand to hand. So let's say our listeners decided to yes, it's super complicated. I don't want to deal with it. I'm just going to Connectbooks. I want them to start working with me and I don't have any headaches anymore. So at this point, what kind of information except API integration do you need to start?
The first thing is usually we on a call is, they have to create a Connectbooks account and then, we have the API. And then usually what we do is we do an onboarding call where we would connect it to QuickBooks. And on the onboarding call, we'd walk them through the process, give them the different options of how to do bookkeeping and how to make sure stuff are done properly and in the right way. So they know how to get it done, what works in them best. Now, we do have another service that we're actually launching now is we do a full bookkeeping service on our own. So if people call in and they want bookkeeping, we can give them a full bookkeeping service. Now, what we're doing also is not always are we able to handle new bookkeeping clients just because of service-based business and we need to hire more people and we also need to train them. It's not like we just dump people on. So in that case, what we're launching now is we're working now in a huge partnership program with different accountants and bookkeepers who, want to learn how to use Connectbooks. And if you're looking, if you come to us and you want to use a platform, what we can do is we can match you up with a vetted bookkeeper who knows what they're doing. Now, I've seen a lot of bookkeeping companies out there who have no clue what's going on, but what we do is when we partner with a bookkeeping company, we vet them. So whatever your price range is, like whatever you want to spend, we can find somebody in that budget for you. And, we can hook you up with the right bookkeeping company where, that's how you can work with them and, get everything the right way how you want it.
This is amazing. Nachman, thank you so much for sharing all this info. And again, as I mentioned in the very, very beginning, guys, I don't like to do any type of bookkeeping as an accountant. And as Nachman said, he hates marketing. So everyone's supposed to do something they're experts at. And don't try to keep up with the bookkeeping or accounting or marketing if you're not the specialist. And especially if you've never learned or experienced in this. And I know a lot of clients, our clients, and I know a lot of people in the industry that are using Connectbooks because they are doing things right. And at this point, personal recommendations, if you want to make sure your numbers are correct and you're not losing something on cost of goods or you're not missing any numbers, connect under this video or under this podcast with Connectbooks, and I believe your numbers will be on place and you'll understand where is your margin, where you will be able to grow, or maybe you have to cut some type of products that are making you feel some suffer. So Nachman, do you want to add something else for our listeners?
Yes, I do want to leave a special offer for your listeners. We're going to offer them 10% off for 6 months. And the coupon code will be Ritz10. So just when you sign up to Connectbooks, we do give a 30-day free trial. But we ask for a credit card up front. And when you come to the credit card form, you'll see in the bottom where there's an option add coupon. Just type in Ritz10 and that will give you 10% off for 6 months.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Well, Ritz10 right here, and go and connect it. Nobody is forcing you to stay. However, it's never hurt to try. Again, thank you so much for being here today, and I'll see you around very soon.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Bye.